Okay,
Great.
great.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to CB14's Community Environment, Cultural Affairs, and Economic Development Committee meeting on Thursday, January 18th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. Happy New Year, everyone. Online via WebEx, and our first presentation will be from Paige Kloss, a New York City planning fellow, who will share a preliminary report on flooding in Community District 14. Thank you. Please take it away, Paige.
Yeah, let me see. I've never used WebEx before, so let me just try to share my screen real quick.
And I've made you presenter.
Okay, awesome. Um, um,
The rectangle with the little
yeah, it's trying to make me like give access. Oh, here we go. That should have done it. Still not working. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Hey, Joanne here. Are you using the desktop version of WebEx?
No, I actually downloaded the app.
You did. You downloaded the app. Okay.
Oh, wait, I see now it's telling me to quit and reopen. So if I could leave for one moment, I'll be right back.
We'll be here.
Right.
Paige, I think you're muted.
For some reason, it is still not allowing me. Um, yeah, it's still wanting me to just open system preferences, but that I did what it asked me to do, and it still won't let me share my screen.
John, you're muted as well.
Yeah, you can email it to me, Paige, and I can see if I can share it.
That would be awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course. Let's see if that works.
Let me see. Okay. All right, just shared that with you, Sean, as a PDF.
Well, I'm having the same problem, and I've with the open system preferences.
Yeah, right. I don't know what that's about.
So I think I can keep trying to do this, and you can, if you just want to talk through the slides. I think you mostly had a PowerPoint with narrative and bullet points, right? There weren't
Mhm.
maps or anything. So why don't you go ahead and talk us through it, if you don't mind that pivot?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
It's
I
no
will see
problem.
what I can do in the meantime.
Yeah, no worries at all. I'll just um okay, hello everyone. My name is Paige. I'm a community planning fellow for the Fund for the City of New York, and today I'll just be telling you about my work plan and project on flooding resilience in Community District 14. So for my project description, my project is to develop a comprehensive understanding of the initiatives which the city has in place to mitigate flooding, as well as understanding how to best help residents and businesses with chronic flooding. These findings are to help the board to gain attention and needed funding to projects which include cloudburst management program, rainfall ready, bioswales, rain gardens, and lakeshore project. Urgent collaboration between city, state, and federal agencies is emphasized due to the critical nature of the projects. The goal is to analyze how to simultaneously address and prioritize immediate needs while also considering long-term resiliency goals. So the timeline that I laid out, so I just put one part of December and then January, February, and then another of March and April. So in December, I started by researching and understanding the history and scope of flooding within the district and the various things that play into it, like, for example, the combined sewer system. I then created questions for residents and small business owners, which I would have showed you on the next slide. I can read some to you. I'm aiming at getting those surveys out within the next week. So then now I'm in the January to February section. I will be going on a tour of the district with Sean soon. I'm currently researching the long-term projects as well as other cities that experience flooding and their solutions for it. Also hoping to get some field research and photos during a storm soon, which shouldn't be too hard considering the weather that we've had lately. Then in early March, I will provide the committee with my preliminary report for you all to review. And then about a month later, I will give my final presentation on my findings to the community board. And then the next slides are, I have some questions for the Church Ave bid and then questions for residents as well. I can read off just some questions that I find in, just some questions that I think are important, such as, so some questions for the businesses. How do you think the Business Improvement District can better support businesses in dealing with flooding related issues? Are there specific recommendations or solutions you would propose to improve flood resilience for businesses in the area? Are there concerns about the long-term sustainability of your business in this flood-prone location? And some of these questions will be multiple choice, others will be open-ended because I'd really like for these surveys to be a chance for folks to express themselves and their concerns, especially if they were unable to make it to the flood mitigation town hall. So then some questions that I had for residents as well, asking if the city has implemented any flood protection measures for their property, if they have, if the flooding has affected their health and safety, and any recommendations or solutions that they believe could help alleviate the flooding. I have quite a number more that I can share with y'all to review at your own convenience. The next slide, I listed just some contacts and sources. So for contacts, I have Sean. Rita Joseph, the District 40 council member, residents of Community District 14, community merchants, local organizations, and the Church Ave bid. And then some sources that I have been working with so far. One of them is the Urban Flooding Open Knowledge Network. This network shares open source data related to urban infrastructure and flooding. Their goal is better planning, response, and general use of information about spaces that are affected by urban flooding. And they take a holistic approach to understanding short and long-term impacts. It also provides a historical analysis and tools for assessing flood risk changes over time. The goal is to empower the public and first responders with actionable insights during flood events. And then another resource that I've been using is the NYC Environmental Protection Flood Prevention, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's just what city agencies have to say about flooding protections. I've also looked back at the community board records, which Sean has provided in reference to flooding dating back to 2008. So that includes some emails, as well as I looked through some 311 calls about flooding. And another source that I've been using that Sean actually shared with me is FloodNet, which is a cooperative of communities, researchers, and New York City government agencies working to better understand the impacts of flooding. Oh, there we go. Working to, sorry, lost myself for a second. Better understand the impacts of flooding in New York. So they've developed some real-time flood sensors with the goal of providing information on the presence, frequency, and depth of hyper-local street-level flood events. And this information is for policymakers, government agencies, citizens, emergency response teams. And I'm hoping also that by presenting this report to them, it could potentially get some flood sensors in the district, specifically in the 5 hotspots that we see. And that is about it. That's what I've got for you today.
Thanks, Edson, for being there in the clutch.
Yeah, of course.
We
well,
can
thanks,
go
Ed.
back,
Yeah.
I guess, just to have it on the record, this for our recording, the questions that Paige mentioned in the timeline. But I'd like to just turn it over to the board for questions. I will go ahead and stop sharing at this moment.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yeah, go ahead, Liz.
Thank you. Really great to see, such a wide survey on this, and excited for your continued work on this effort. As I'm sure Sean and others have briefed you, I think one of the things that has been really difficult about some of the flooding in this area is just that it's been going on and on and on for decades and decades and decades. And, I think that some of the things, for instance, council members and other people have at their tools as quick fixes to provide are like the rain barriers you can inflate, but that doesn't really help when water's coming up the sewers, when your street is just so flooded that it would go over a rain barrier and so forth. And I guess just like one thing that, at the flooding town hall that I believe was mentioned and so forth, has kind of kept coming up is that there's this large push to do a study, for instance, for the Lakeshore project to make sure that there's enough kind of water capacity being done with that research. But that project also, needing to get funding for a long time, even once they know what to do, will take at least a few years, right? And so I guess just one of the questions, and maybe just ideas for further study, is just what sort of things can happen in the meantime? Because I think one of the things I hear most when I talk to other residents in the district is just that of course people want the perfect solution that's going to just take care of it, but as storms keep getting more erratic with climate change, and also just we might get that number wrong a little. How do we make sure we're planning both for enough in the long run, but also if we know it's a big job, what's stopping from starting to do some of it kind of as you go, and taking a section, for instance, of the Lakeshore Project doing as much as you can to retain water there, and then just kind of like, seeing, keep going. I think you get what I'm saying. Like from a regular human perspective, you don't have to solve the entire problem to make sure it's gone. Like if your roof was leaking, you saw a hole, you wouldn't be like, oh, let me do a triple check. There aren't any other holes before fixing that one. You'd patch it, right? And so I think that that's one of the big frustrations and difficulties I've heard a lot, is just that, this has been happening for a long time, and a lot of the damage that kind of happens is the sort of thing that's like a little harder to get covered because it's just time and labor to get the water out of your home or your business. So just wondered if you had any insight there, or if that's something that can help direct, maybe just some other avenues of future research. Thanks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is why I want to look into these long-term projects to understand the scope of what the goal is, the eventual goal, and then through understanding that, seeing what we can do in the immediate, what is possible in the immediate. And I can say in terms of the Lakeshore Project, my understanding is what's stopping things from happening there is funding. So that's also the point of this project, is to try to get some more funding towards these projects so that these projects can get moving. But I definitely hear you on that's also why I want to survey the residents to try to see if there's some things that we're potentially that I'm missing that can just inform the research better and just provide better avenues for direct and immediate solutions for these issues.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Next, we'll hear from Nina.
Hi, thank you so much, Paige. And Liz, you brought up a lot of really good points. I have a really, really simple, maybe it's too simple a question, but for me it's not. Could you tell us a little more about these flood sensors and how they actually work and what they do? I'm very interested in that. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm frankly not too sure on the technology of them. I know that they are low cost and that they're able to sense what's happening. I haven't done quite too much research on it. So I'm not able to, I'm sorry, respond
I mean, do you
at
know
appropriate length.
if they're actually like located at ground level in areas that have been identified as trouble spots? I guess that's more what I mean, I know people get like these flood sensors that they put in their basements if they've had water issues. So I guess I'm in my mind,
Yeah,
I'm kind of seeing it as
I'll
something.
be able to circle back to you on that, and I can get you the
Okay.
site, and I can get you the map, and I can even provide a link where people can make a request for them. I don't know exactly how they're installed, but I know there is one at East 10th and Church telling us things we already know, but but of course substantiating and documenting and being able to sort of fill in database. So we'll get that up on the website sort of as an attached file to this presentation or this meeting recording as we do.
Neat. Thank you.
Just one more comment. A lot of what I'm doing is basically just articulating the information that y'all and residents already know, truly.
But it's like kind of quantifying and validating it.
Yeah, I
Putting it
think
just
right
in a
now it just
report,
sort of
yeah.
right now the story sort of lies in different cells on the giant spreadsheet that is our CRM in the office, and in various emails that are still in our email stock. So it's sort of drawing out the narrative and creating a persuasive document. So as Paige said, we can use it to gain traction on funding, on expediting projects, and on, to Liz's point, on identifying short-term mitigation while we're working on those long-term solutions.
Thank you.
We have another question from Liz Denny's, but before Liz, before you go ahead, just wanted to ask Paige, would it be helpful if I connected you with the Rain Coalition? Some folks there over as a part of like the Newtown Creek Alliance.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to do that. Liz, go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to note that the sensor, including the one at East 10th Street, you can see it at dataviz, dataviz.floodnet.nyc. And there's more on kind of the methodology and like the tools that do the sensing at www.floodnet.nyc/methodology, just in case anyone sees this before it gets up on the website or is like really excited to look at it tonight. Wanted to just put those links in there because I've had them bookmarked a while.
Thank you for that.
Are there any other questions from audience members? Sean, go ahead.
I just want to ask that, everybody and anybody who's on this, or, if it gets shared and somebody mentions it to you, who's willing to be a resource, if just send me an email with contact information, because I know Paige is looking to speak to, to people like Liz who are living this and can share the sort of lived experience of this project. And so please let me know if you have resources or will be a resource. Thanks.
I'm not seeing any other questions. So Paige, thank you so much for your time and your efforts on this. I'll gladly turn it over to my co-chair, Melissa, who can introduce our next topic and speaker.
Thank you, Ed. So our next guest speaker is Sharon Gadbois. I hope that's right. I might be wrong.
No, that's actually correct.
Okay. Well, thank
you for pronouncing it right.
Sure. And she's here from the Small Business Administration, and she'll be presenting tonight on various SBA programs specifically for flood victims. So these two go together.
Yeah, Sean did inform me that he was queuing me up with someone else who was going to be talking about flooding. And so I thought that was quite interesting that he was able to tie that together. Yeah. All right, so I guess I have the floor. So thank you so much for inviting me to come to your board meeting this evening and offering up the SBA program as it relates to the September 28, 29, 30th flooding that you had last year. And so I was in New York for the flooding for a couple of weeks, and then they were going to send me to Tennessee after the Christmas break, and they said, nope, we lied. We're sending you back to New York. So I was really happy about that. I could explore more of NYC because that was my first time going. So I did make it to, Times Square, Central Park, Tiffany's, and also Serendipity Cafe. So I was really excited about all those things. So, but aside from all that, we did do a lot of work with the Health Essential Association down in Bethpage, which is South Brooklyn. And we also worked with the United Jewish Organization in North Brooklyn and Williamsburg. And then, of course, when they had me come back for the 5-alarm fire that happened in August 20th of last year in Williamsburg on Lee Avenue and Williamsburg Street, and those businesses that were impacted. So I came back to New York City and we worked in Williamsburg for that as well. But as the program relates to the September flooding event that occurred in the 5 boroughs, as well as Nassau County, and also the contiguous county and Suffolk County. So there were 2 counties that were considered primaries in this administrative declaration. Now, an administrative declaration is slightly different from a presidential declaration. And I think you guys are familiar with, I don't know, maybe Ida or Hurricane Sandy from a time or two before, right? I guess I'm not head nod. So in a presidential declaration, you do have like a primary county, and then you'll also have what we call contiguous counties or the adjacent counties to the primary counties. That means that primary counties, that means a lot of the damage happened there. And then if there's a presidential declaration, of course, FEMA would be present. And And if FEMA is present, that means that there will be grants available as well as the low interest disaster loans from the SBA. Now, FEMA is really there to get you your leg up. And then SBA, of course, is for the long-term aspect, right? We're there for the long haul because it doesn't take 5 minutes to recover from a disaster, as you all probably know, right? Even though we'd like to think so, it doesn't happen that way, right? It seems like the eggs and all the check boxes don't check off all at the same time. It's all very varied. Okay, so in an administrative declaration, only SBA is present. Okay, and the programs are the same with the exception of in the primary counties and contiguous counties can both residents and homeowners and businesses apply for physical damages. Whereas if you want a presidential declaration, only primary counties, homeowners, renters, and businesses can apply for physical damages. And so in an administrative declaration, like the flooding, let's say in a contiguous county, and I think that was New York was one of them, and Queens might have been another one. And so I'm going off memory here because now I'm in Tennessee working another declaration. And so in a contiguous county, for let's say the September flooding, if let's say I'm just going to use Paige because she was a previous speaker, so let's just say Aunt Paige here. Let's say she lived in an area where like one of the contiguous counties, maybe New York County, I don't know, I'm just using that as an example. And so if she lived there, let's say she didn't replace her roof in the last, I don't know, 15 years, and the rain came down excessively and caused a huge gaping hole in her roof. Well, now she needs to replace it. If she was in a presidential declaration living in a contiguous county, she would not be eligible to apply for low interest disaster loans with the SBA. However, the flooding event declaration is an administrative declaration and she would be eligible to apply even though she's in a contiguous county. Okay, so homeowners and renters, let's see, homeowners are eligible up to a maximum of 500,000. They changed that maximum number as of August 1st of last year. Renters are eligible up to a maximum of 100,000, and businesses are eligible up to a maximum of 2 million. Okay, I like to use kind of like an example to kind of get the hone in on the how the program might work or what might help you understand eligibility. And so I'm just going to use Aunt Paige here again, okay? And so let's say Aunt Paige is a do-it-yourselfer, okay? And she's a do-it-yourselfer. She calls all of her roofing buddies and gets the best estimate to fix her roof. Let's say, I don't know, let's just say it's 50,000. Okay, it's probably more expensive, maybe 200,000 in New York, but let's just say 50,000 for small numbers, right? Okay, so she goes to the local lumberyard, buys all of her supplies to fix her roof, and she gets to the checkout counter and she uses what? A credit card. Okay, so you guys would probably agree that if you don't make that $50,000 payment on your credit card in 30 days, that your credit's probably going to get shot and your interest rates are going to go sky high, right? Because you would probably agree with me that credit card nowadays interest rates are around 20 or 30%. Okay, so if you took out a low interest disaster loan with the SBA, okay, as a homeowner, it's as low as 2.5% compared with 20% with a credit card. You see where I'm going with that? So you're saving thousands of dollars by taking out a government low interest disaster loan with the SBA versus using your credit card. Now, most people will use a credit card in the beginning if they're a do-it-yourselfer. They don't want to wait for government funding to come down because sometimes it doesn't come down right away. Sometimes it takes a few months. Sometimes it takes a couple of weeks. It just really depends on the nature of the communication back and forth between the state and the government agencies. Okay, and so sometimes people, if they're do-it-yourselfers, they're going to start putting their recovery on their credit cards. I heard on CBS 12 News that somebody was using their kids' college funds. So it's the same concept. You can apply for the low interest disaster loan and pay yourself back for all the supplies that you purchased for it using the other monies. And now you have up to 30 years to pay it off. There's no prepayment penalty or no closing costs. Sorry, strike that. So there's no prepayment penalties. And if you wanted to make a big payment at the end of, let's say, in a year's time, you wanted to pay it all off, you could do that. If you just wanted to make a partial payment, you could do that. Now, I did want to point out that There is a program that they started about a year and a half ago that is now permanent. It's a 12-month deferment, and during that 12-month deferment, it's 0% interest. So let me say that one more time. So during the 12-month deferment of the first year, it's a 0% interest. Okay, so let's say Aunt Paige here took out, let's say, a renovation loan with her bank, and let's say it was 200,000 versus the 50,000. Okay, and so when I worked in Georgia, it was 7% interest rate. When I was in New York, it was around 9%. So 9% times 200,000 is 18,000 that she would owe the bank the first year in interest. Unfortunately, she would also owe the bank another 18,000 in the next year. With the SBA, the first year is 0%, and the second year is 2.5% as a homeowner. That's $5,000 you owe within 2-year time frame versus the 38,000 that you would owe with the bank. Does that make sense? Okay, so I think there might be some questions, so I'd like to take some questions if possible, and that will help me to elaborate on some other things that you guys might have questions for. You want me to just keep going? Okay, so a lot of times people will call their insurance company first after disaster. That's really important that you want to do that. Now, a lot of people are thinking that they're probably covered after, because they have insurance. They're like thinking they're covered. I can tell you that more often than not, you're probably not covered, at least not all of it. Now, a lot of people are, but not, and then there are some people that are not. And so it's always a good idea to call your insurance company to negotiate how much they're going to send you. And it's not going to be in a couple months. It's probably going to be 8 or 9 months down the road. That's been my experience. Now, maybe you know the insurance guy and you're really best friends with him or her, and you know that they're going to cut you a check on the DL. Maybe they will, but most probably not, right? And so, and then what I say by negotiate, more than often than not, that you're going to negotiate some kind of rate or whatever the check's going to be. And oftentimes, when you get the check in the mail, it's never what you agreed upon. It's not always the case, but it does happen a lot. Okay. And so we don't actually provide duplication of benefits. So if you got grants from the state, or maybe you got from the county to help you with whatever's going on there, whatever kind of damage you had. And so SBA will actually provide you the money up front. And so when you get money from, let's say, your insurance company or some grants, you need to apply it to the loan balance because by law, we're not allowed to provide duplication of benefits. Okay. So that's one aspect. Let's say if you guys are familiar with businesses in the community, let's say in Brooklyn County, let's say Aunt Paige here has a big family of 50, let's say. And let's say every Saturday they meet up for lunch over at Ma and Pa restaurant in Brooklyn. You can actually get a meatloaf sandwich, fries, and a drink for $15. And so if she's taking out her huge family of 50, baller Paige, every Saturday to this restaurant, I know you're smiling. I can see it in your face. And so it's 15 times 50. That's $750 a week that she's spending over there. And then times 4, that's $3,000 a month that Aunt Paige here is circulating into the Ma and Pa restaurant in Brooklyn. And so in the beginning, she was fixing up her roof because it was damaged in the September. That's due to Tropical Storm Ophelia, actually. And she was fixing up her roof. So all of her funding and her ancillary funds go towards fixing up her home back to pre-existing conditions. Okay. And that means all of her funding and circulation of money to restaurants, or what she would normally do, like if she was hanging out with her family every week, or maybe she could get her hair done, maybe she goes to karate classes, maybe she has all these extracurricular activities that she spends money on. But if her home is damaged, I can tell you that all of her funding is going to stop, not just her, but everyone. Okay, it's like a little tornado going off in your brain when your home is damaged. It's a catastrophic event. It's very similar to like when people lose their jobs. It's catastrophic, right? So everything stops. People have to reassess what's going on in their life before they can start circulating money again. Okay, so she's stopping the spending of the $3,000 at the Ma and Pa restaurant in Brooklyn, and that means that's $3,000 a month that restaurant is no longer getting. Okay, that means that they might not have money for payroll. They might not have money to keep the lights on. They might not have money to buy the supplies that they need to sell in order to make a profit. So that now means that that business is economically impacted. So you might refer to that as an economic downturn, a pinch in revenue. The SBA refers to it as economic injury. And now that restaurant would now be eligible for our economic injury disaster loan program. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Any questions? I know there's got to be some. Somebody raise their hand. Yeah, Carl, go ahead. Just unmute yourself and ask. I'm flexible.
So, folks, good evening. Sharon, thank you very much. My first question is about the economic injury, and then my second one was about re-clarifying the difference between the presidential declaration versus the administrative one you had mentioned earlier. And so my question for the economic injury one is, I understood the thought exercise you went through on page. I guess my question is, if I'm the diner, how would I prove that the loss in revenue that I've sustained is because some sort of natural disaster occurred? Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's my first question. And then the second one is just can you re-explain the difference between that presidential declaration and then that administrative one?
Yep. Okay. So on the EIDL declaration, of course, when you fill out the application, it's going to ask you, how much revenue you made, and, in the previous year, right? And so you would probably show your last year's. I would say probably you will show your last year's federal tax returns. Sometimes you'll go up to 3 years previous to kind of get an idea, because every year you should be making a little more, right? And you might even have to show projection, profit and loss. You might have to do. You also have to do what we call a schedule of liabilities, which is a form 2202. And now on the new application system, you might not actually fill out the form. They may actually just ask you questions and you just fill it out one by one. But a schedule of liabilities typically means that you have fixed expenses every month. They want to know what those are, because the capital that you receive from SBA goes towards your fixed expenses that you would normally have to pay had the disaster not occurred. So there will be documents that you'll have to supply, or maybe it'll be through the new application system where they ask you a question one by one, you fill out the information, maybe use a multiple choice. It's all buried up. It's very interesting how they have a new application. And so instead of looking at a form, let's say, and filling out the boxes one by one, it's like sort of more user friendly, if you will. And so a little AI generated in there as well. So you will, in a nutshell, to just get a grasp and understanding of how you prove it, is simply if you were the diner, let's say, and you obviously had a slowdown in traffic. You could actually either you might know your QuickBooks scenario if you're a QuickBooks user. You can look at your revenue from last year compared with this year. And I mean last year as in so the storm happened in 2023. So last year, meaning 2020, September, the date of the storm, in 22 to, let's say now, right, January 23. And then you would look at the September 23 through January 24, the same time frame. And if you have a deficit, more than likely it's due to that. Okay. And now your other question was, okay, the differences between presidential and administrative. So in a presidential declaration, you will have FEMA and the cavalry out, right? FEMA will be present, SBA will be present, United Way, Red Cross, like the whole gamut will be out, right? And so also when you have FEMA present, you have what we call primary counties, but FEMA calls them IA counties, which means individual assistance. So in the IA counties, you would have grants available in those counties for FEMA. And then you would also have SBA low interest disaster loans available. So we actually help homeowners and renters, as well as nonprofits and business owners. More than 85% of the people that SBA helps are homeowners and renters. Okay, so in a presidential declaration, you'll have the IA counties that FEMA covers. Those were what we call primary counties. That means where the primary damage happened. So in this particular case, let's just say, use the September flooding as an example. Let's say Kings County, pretty much Brooklyn, right, was the only county, just for an example. Okay, even though it wasn't, but let's just for an example, fictitious example. Okay, so Kings County. So all the counties touching Kings County, we call them contiguous. You might refer to them as neighboring counties or adjacent counties. Okay, mostly the 5 boroughs, right? And so those would be eligible for, in a presidential, the contiguous counties, only small businesses are eligible for idle in contiguous counties. Okay, does that make sense? Carl? Okay. And so okay, great. And then also in an administrative declaration, the difference is in the contiguous counties, not only are businesses eligible to apply, but homeowners and renters are also eligible to apply. So the difference is in a contiguous county, an administrative declaration, it's like saying they should be primary counties as well because they are eligible for all of the programs. Does that kind of make sense? So homeowners, renters, nonprofits, and businesses in the contiguous counties are eligible for physical damages as well as opposed to in a presidential declaration in the contiguous county, only small businesses are eligible for idle only. Does that make sense? Because there are more
Yes.
organizations involved, so I think they have to delineate and have to cut it off, right? Where if the SBA is the only agency involved, we can be a little bit more flex on who's, who can apply for the funding. Make sense?
Gotcha. Thank you. Yes, thank you
okay.
for that clarity, because that's the part where I got lost in terms of when it got to the contiguous counties, like where the scope expanded or didn't. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other questions? Don't be shy.
Yeah, it looks like Sean has the question.
Thank you,
Okay.
Seth.
Yep.
My question is goes back to the injured businesses and whether or not the businesses, in your example, the business remained open but took a hit in the number of patrons. Whereas I know in our circumstances in after September, businesses were closed partly because access to them was compromised and they didn't
Yep.
have to put their customers in harm's way, and,
Right.
and also then deliveries. Delivery access was compromised. Would those closures impact their claim to injury?
Yes. So no. So that would actually be part of their injury. Yeah, because that would actually, that would be exactly economic injury right there. Yeah. Come on, I know there's more questions, and I know you guys, unless you're experts.
I do have another one about deadline and the term that these programs remain in place and whether there's like a statute of limitations.
Okay, so the physical property damage is deadline is February 2nd, which is actually equal to Groundhog's Day, and that's a Friday, just in case you were wondering. So that's like a couple weeks away, right? And so you have until February 2nd to apply for physical property damages. Okay, so if your business or your home suffered any kind of damage from the flooding, you're eligible to apply for physical property damage. Now, if you're a renter, you would only be eligible for personal property damage, not physical, because you don't own the building. We also cover underinsured and uninsured losses. That's underinsured and uninsured losses. We cover insurance deductibles and automobiles as well. So if you guys are, and I've been trying to, and I don't always have a chance to do this, but if you guys are familiar with any car dealerships, okay? So if people have, had major flooding, and let's say they had a BMW, well, BMW cars engines sit low to the ground. So if it floods, that car is flooding out, okay? And 1 second. Okay, we got some more questions. So just hold on 1 second. And so, and I'll let Ed or Sean call on you guys. So, so if something was flooded out, right, let's say a car, then it would be beneficial for, let's say, the car dealerships, salespeople to be familiar with the SBA programs. Why? I mean, I used to work in car sales, so I'm familiar with this. So when people come into a dealership, you ask them like, well, what brings you in today? That's the big question, right? And so if they say, well, my car was damaged in the flood, right away, they should say, do you know about the SBA program that's available to you? Because people don't know that they can actually get funds for flooded cars or damaged cars, and they can go out and take the money and go buy another car. Okay, Let's see, first hand was Glenn. You can go ahead and ask.
Thank you. I'm curious as to where the funding comes from for the SBA.
The Treasury Department.
Okay.
Not for me. I'm
right.
just the gatekeeper. Just the messenger.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, directly from the federal government. Okay. Joanne, can you show your face? Is that possible?
No, I'm okay. I'm kind of sitting on the couch and everything's a little crazy eating dinner. I have a quick
Okay.
question, a little,
Yep.
maybe. So we live in New York City. That's not just homeowners, but also co-op and condo owners. And I'm curious about coverage for loss assessment, which means if I was displaced from my home or my apartment, which is a condo or a co-op, I still owe maintenance or maintenance, which includes property taxes. Is loss assessment, which, you know, let's just say I have on my insurance policy, is that also something that's covered by the SBA?
So that's kind of a rabbit hole question, and maybe more of a loan officer question. But the thing is, if you have, like, you were displaced from your home because of the flooding, and you're eligible to apply for funding from the SBA. So I would encourage you to go to sba.gov/disaster and apply.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Any more questions? Go ahead, ask your tough questions. Now's the time, because if somebody were to ask you a question, I'm sure. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Glenn.
Thank you. So if I'm understanding correctly, the advantage of the SBA over FEMA is the contiguous neighborhoods, but the advantage of the FEMA is the possibility of grants as opposed to loans. Is
Yeah,
that
so
accurate?
if it was a presidential declaration, let's say Ida or Sandy, where it was a presidential declaration, there are grants available. But sometimes, like, the emergency managers know that, like, if depending on the amount of damage that's happened, right, it has to be a certain amount of damage in order to have certain kind of programs available. And I don't know what the threshold is. And so when there's damage, you need to report it to your emergency manager. That's super important. Now, a lot of people don't realize that they can actually contact their emergency manager. It's really important for your community board to know this, as well as sending this message out to the residents within your community, right? It's really important they have any kind of damage, contact the emergency manager, because they're your they're your liaison. They're the people that are going to go to bat for you guys, and they're going to push the information towards the state and let them know, hey, we have a lot of damage here. We need to get funding here ASAP. And if not a lot of people are reporting, then they may not think that there's any damage in their county, and then therefore they're not going to submit the documentation that's needed to get the funding for their county. Okay, so I think Shayla Clark, she was the emergency manager for Nassau County, who was instrumental in getting SBA in-house for the September flooding event. So she had like 400 people come to her in Nassau County, and she's the one that, you know, in the town of Hempstead was a big one over there. And so she was instrumental in getting the funding available. Now, I think they might have given her like a choice of, sometimes they give, the state might give them a choice between two types of organizations. I don't really know how that all comes down. They just say, show up and I'm there. And so sometimes a grant might take a little longer to receive. It takes a little longer sometimes to get grant funding. So sometimes even like in presidential declarations, there might be grants available. Sometimes you'll see, like during Hurricane Ian and Nicole down in Florida, people getting that $700 stipend that a lot of people are aware of. That comes from the state. Like the state actually has to go into what they call a share. So it's 25% that charged to the state, and then I think FEMA does the other 75%. It's a shared cost to get that out there. And some states don't have a budgeting system for that. It's different than other states. So some states may qualify for certain things where other states might not. And it's just because of how the state is run. Nothing to do with, whether one governor did something or not the other. So just to kind of keep that in mind. But when it comes down to like that initial stipend that goes out for a grant, like the $700 or something like that to go get groceries and, pay maybe first month's rent or half of it or some money down towards something to kind of get your feet off the ground. That's a shared cost that comes from, the grant through FEMA. Now, other grants that you get, I mean, you might get up to 37,000, but typically the average that you get from FEMA might be somewhere around 3,000. I think that's at most the typical average that I've seen in my experience. I don't know that not everyone would get that. It just varies. Every situation is different. But when it comes to grants, the low interest disaster loans with the SBA, the first year is a 0% and 12-month deferment. Typically, SBA funds come out pretty quick, and it's long term, right? It's up to 30 years to pay it back, and it's a lot more money. So that you can get to recover, your damages. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Did you have another question? Somebody did. Okay, Melissa, go ahead.
Thanks. So one of the things I was actually interested in, just doing a little bit of digging, and the mitigation assistance looks pretty interesting. I don't know if you know
Okay,
this.
yeah, so I'll take it from here. Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, Brooklyn, New York City in general, it's a lot of renters, more renters than homeowners.
Right.
And the fact that there's like mitigation assistance in these loans, grants would kind of be kind of better to me, but there's actually these pieces out there that are incentives to make buildings better. I would love it if my landlord knew that, but they really have no incentive to make the building better and, to protect against future wind damage, hail damage, rain, flooding, all that.
So it all comes
I'm
down
actually
to
wondering, well, sorry.
education. You're fine.
I was just gonna say kind of two-part, like, I would love to learn more about that. But also a kind of a second part is there anything in place to prevent them, I guess in this case, landlords, from then passing on those costs, even if they're getting a kind of a perk in the form of a nice loan, but then passing it on in the form of like major capital improvements onto the renters?
So I don't know about the passing on to the renters. That's not that's that's between you and the renter, you and the landlord. But the mitigation is not really a loan per se. It's an aspect where they'll give you they as an SBA will give you up to 20% of whatever the verified loss is, and you have to be a homeowner. It has to be tied to physical property damage. So if you're a renter, you only get personal property because of course you don't own the home. But a homeowner. Sorry, strike that. A renter is eligible up to 100,000 for loss of damages and stuff for all their contents inside the home or inside the structure. And so as far as landlord, if the landlord is not familiar with damages that they incurred from the storm, maybe it would be in our duty to inform renters, the landlords, and let them know that, hey, these programs are available to you. You should seek out information or maybe slip something under their door. Or, sometimes what I like to do is talk to associations, HOAs and things like that, because then those board meetings tend to be a little bit larger. And then sometimes, educating even just the board members about the programs that are available to them, because we do HOAs as well. They do that as well. So it's important to make sure that HOAs know about these programs that are available to them and that they can take advantage of. Now, these are low interest disaster loans, the maximum amount of money that a business can have, even if let's say it's a large business. So the EIDL is only for small businesses, but let's say physical damages up to a maximum of 2 million by law. So, I don't know how much money they can really upgrade, because when you're damaged from a storm, you're not upgrading anything. Okay, you're either damaged or you're not. It's not like you're either damaged, injured, or you're expanding. It's not both. So if you're injured from a storm, you're trying to repair, replace, rebuild the damages that you incurred from the storm. No, and in some cases, you can use the funds to refinance or relocate if you need to. Yeah, I hope that helps you. Yeah. Any other questions? So you guys are experts now. Someone comes to you, know how to answer all the questions.
I do believe we had one other question from.
Yep, I didn't see the hand. Where is it?
That's my hand. That's my
Oh,
virtual
okay,
hand.
go ahead, Carl. Sorry.
Sure. That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah.
So it's a two-part question, and so the first part's about communication, and so my question is, like you mentioned, you do speak with HOA, so my question is just, do either you or someone else from SBA, speak with like the offices of the elected officials and let them know about these programs? I know it's on them to share that with the communities, but that's my first thing. And the second piece of that communication is some of the forms and things that you had mentioned that people can apply for. My question is, do you have those available in like multiple languages? And if so, what are those? And then the third question I had is, when you were mentioning about like the case of a homeowner, right, where it's either a replace or a rebuild, it's not an upgrade. I was curious about that just because, I'm a renter, I'm not a homeowner, but I'm just wondering, could there be a gray area where you would sustain such damage due to flooding that your rebuild is essentially an upgrade, right? Like I'm not a homeowner, but I'm wondering, like, so those
I
are my
see what you're
questions.
saying.
Basically.
I guess if you are rebuilding and it's essentially an upgrade, I mean, you're going to replace the home, and you're probably going to do it according to code, right? So that could potentially be an upgrade. But what I mean is, some people think that they can use the funds and they can go like, put marble in their home and, all these fancy upgrades, right? And that's not what it is. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, you're going to have to remind me the other questions because I don't have a good memory when it comes to too many questions at once.
No problem. Sure. So my first question was just for communication. It was two-part. The first part is just, do you or someone from your office, let the offices of the elected officials know, like these various programs that the SBA offers, like you're telling us right now? That's the first question.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me answer that one first. So we actually have what we call a focus stakeholder list, and we do all the research for it prior to going into the field. So we talk to governor, we send the information to the governor, the New York State. I talked to NYSEM, New York City Emergency Management. So we talk to senators and all the Congress people and their district managers. So if you guys know Orlando Ross, he's the one that put me in touch with you guys. Let's see, we talk to chamber directors, we talk to all the mayors or the clerks if the mayors are not available, or town supervisors if you're in Nassau County, Nassau County, sorry. And there's like all the way down the line. We even talk to, like, if there's leaders in the underserved market space, we try to talk to them as much as we can. Sometimes when we're out there in an administrative declaration, they give us 2 weeks to talk to everyone, and for one person, that's can sometimes be a lot. But I was really glad that NYSEM would put together a very nice community host meeting for me where I was the keynote, and they did do a recording. So what I could do is I can send that link over to Sean, and she can send it out to you guys, and then everyone in the community, so you guys can have a look-see at that. And so there's lots of different things. I wanted to do more, but they really only gave me a couple of weeks, and then I had a little extra time there because of the Williamsburg fire, but I hit the ground running over there. I actually went to every single business on Williamsburg Street and Lee Avenue and talked to everyone over there, so I know everyone by name. So I do try to get to the people that are impacted directly. It's really important for me as a person to make sure that I, communicate or interact with people that are impacted. But sometimes, like on a large scale, like the September flood, it's not foreseeable for me to, of course, talk to everyone that was impacted. But that's why I utilize the boards, community boards, to help me liaise that information out. It's my job to give you our program information as a tool in your tool shed. So should something like this come down the pipe in the future, you'll know, how to guide people, direct people, or even, who to contact. I saw some hands fly, but I don't remember where they were. And wait, Carl, you had one more question. I'm sorry. What was it?
No problem. So thank you very much for letting me know the various ways that you and your office communicate with people, like up and down the line and, left and right and whatever. I appreciate that. So my other communication question was just languages, right? Like you mentioned, there are various forms and things are a bit more user-friendly. So I was just curious, like, again, with the diner, right? Like, let's say it's a Greek diner or, it's a Pakistani diner, whatever, right?
You.
Like,
Yeah.
is it just in English or is it available in multiple languages? That's
So,
my question.
So in this particular declaration for the September flooding, New York City Emergency Management asked us for several languages, including Yiddish, which is the Jewish population there. We also got Arabic, and we got several other languages. Typically, when we do our press release and our fact sheet, we initially do it in English and Spanish. Those are the prime languages that we do. And then the additional languages have to come from some kind of major organization like this New York State or emergency management or something like that, right? That will require that because it's very costly to get our documents translated into additional languages. I would think it's more than $1,500 per translation. So it can really add up, especially if there's a lot of them. And I think we had like 9 or 10 of them in New York. So there's definitely additional languages. Is there one in particular that you were thinking of that you needed?
Not me personally. I was just knowing that that's always something I definitely think about. Just that, there's a ton of different languages and dialects. So I was just curious about what the SBA did with that. So thank you for giving me a little bit of insight into, that process essentially.
Okay, welcome. Elizabeth was next and then Nina after that.
Hi, I just had kind of a follow-up, I think, on part of Melissa's question. I guess just, and Carl kind of touched on this too a little, just thinking about how a lot of the homes, especially that lower income renters have kind of lots of things in disrepair, taking these loans and maybe fixing up something like this or grants, it's obviously good to have apartments that are in good condition for people. Right. But, I think there was at least one like feature piece I've read in the last year about someone who has, a kind of below market rent. And the only reason she's able to stay in the city is because she has that, because there's constant flooding into her home. And so I guess I kind of think a lot about how, if these, obviously it's important to keep our housing stock functional and to keep flooding out. But just was wondering if there's any kind of like data that gets followed up with on if rents get raised after this, or, if there's turnover after, or just maybe, maybe your agency doesn't have it, maybe there's a sister agency or something, just something, I think that is probably on a lot of people's minds in the housing affordability crisis, and just knowing that people are getting displaced, especially those who struggle to afford as safe and secure housing.
Liz, so thank you so much for the question, but that's not really an SBA program information, right? This might fall in line with HUD, housing development and urban. And so you might want to reach out to that organization to see if there's any kind of information relating that. As far as like, living in a home, let's say, where the flooding often occurs, or maybe you're in a flood zone, some of the things that people use as part of a mitigation aspect would be like a retaining wall, sub pumps is popular, and other measures that might be able to be put in place. You could, if you're going through the disaster recovery loan process with SBA, you might try to ask a similar question to the loan officer. But if you're looking for some kind of, that answer for
just like specifically, I'm just asking about if a landlord gets funding from this to help fix it. Is there any follow-up to see if there's, been a change in who's in that unit since, if the rent has gone up a lot? I know that there are other programs to get buildings back into order. But just I wanted to know if that's something that is being tracked, and if there's any way for it to potentially be tracked, if if that is a problem or not. Like, we just don't know right now, right? And
Right.
we know it in a broad strokes that when buildings get repaired in New York City, people sometimes get pushed out of them who've been long-term tenants and don't have good other options. So I just was, just wanted to flag it as something that maybe could be added to kind of the data that gets collected through this whole process, because of course we all want the homes to be, for everyone to be as safe and secure as possible and to get repaired. But yeah.
Sure. So this is not like within the SBA wheelhouse. I would probably encourage you to maybe visit with your New York City HUD or even New York City Emergency Management, and maybe even talk with Jill Cornell over there and see if there's some kind of someone that you could talk to over there that might be the best form of contact or point of contact for this particular information, so that you can make sure it gets listed somewhere and it's looked at and it's not in hindsight anymore. So I would just talk to HUD or talk to New York City Emergency Management about that, inquire about it, and see who your best point of contact person would be and who you can work with to make sure that this information stays out in the forefront. Nina was next.
If I may interject, Liz,
Yeah.
I think some of the local electeds may be interested in that. I know this is something in my wheelhouse in terms of my boss. So if you want to reach out to the New York City comptroller regarding that, I think this is an interesting question. And we'll go to Nina, but I do just want to be cognizant of time. We do have one other topic that we want to address tonight. So go ahead, Nina.
No worries,
That will
Ed.
be the
Mine's
last
a
question.
real quickie. I'm just sort of piggybacking onto Carl Henry Caesar's concerns regarding language. And there is a very, very significant Haitian Creole speaking population in Brooklyn. And I don't think I heard you mention anything about getting information out to them. So I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, so I was just using Yiddish as an example. Spanish, English is our primary. I mean, there was like I said, 10 different languages that we got, and Haitian Creole was actually one of them. I just didn't remember them all off the top of my head, but
No worries.
if you need me to send you a list of the ones that we have translated, I'll be happy to send over the list to Sean at a later time. And so if you need the fact sheet or something like that, thanks, Carl. If you need the fact sheet or something like that regarding that particular language, we even had simplified Chinese because you don't do Cantonese in written form, it's only in verbal form. So, just things like that.
Neat. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate coming here and helping you guys learn more about the program. Sean, of course, you have my contact information, and looking forward to meeting your colleagues here in Tennessee. All right, bye.
Thank you so much, Sharon.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
So the next piece that we have on our agenda for tonight was for our committee to review the City of Yes, specifically for economic opportunity. And Sean, I don't know if you wanted to maybe introduce this to put it into the right context.
Sure.
Free to interrupt really quickly. Sean, would you like me to stay for this part, or would you like me to leave?
Before I answered Melissa's question, I was going to say, Paige, you're welcome to stay. You are welcome to depart. So yeah, feel free to sign off.
Okay, I think I'm gonna head out. Thank you all for having me.
Thank
Have a
you as well for your part.
So really, when this was originally put on the agenda, it was before, we do our agendas the middle of the month before. So it was without the knowledge that we would be continuing the conversation about City of Yes for economic opportunity through the Committee of the Whole the week after this. And we thought at the time that it was going to be a way to sort of tie up loose ends, or because we knew that the process for that DCP had was to extend comments through January, but since our board meeting was so early in January, we thought this might just be an opportunity to kind of like highlight some of the things that have been ratified by the board in case there was still an opportunity to add comments from the committee. But because the conversation is still ongoing, I thought we could still have a conversation if anybody has some sort of committee specific questions or concerns that they would like to bring into the committee of whole conversation next week so that it does get highlighted, or just use it as an opportunity to think ahead. And then I can either stop there or share with you. I told Melissa I was going to kind of get, this is a crass way of describing it, but kind of the scorecard on what community boards have posted on the ZAP portal already. And I'd be happy to kind of just quickly summarize those. All right. Melissa, Ed, good with you?
Yep, fine by me.
There's 8, I think there's 18 community boards that are in the ZAP portal now. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them have conditional favorable stances on the zoning text amendment. Another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 have unfavorable, not conditioned, straight up unfavorable. 2 of them have conditioned unfavorable, and 1 has just a straight up favorable. Of the ones that have conditioned favorables, and also the ones who are unfavorable, I would say the proposals that stand out as being objectionable or needing conditions from the points of view of community boards citywide are really 5 and 11 for sure. And 5, you might remember, is the commercial activity on upper floors, and 11 is, entrepreneurship in, home-based entrepreneurship. And then there's also some pushback on the auto repair, and yeah, that's 13. Oh, and there's a few nightlife pops up here and there, but the preponderance of the concerns expressed are on 5 and 9. I could quantify that a little bit tighter, but that's what it looked like at first glance.
Elizabeth?
Do you have any insight into like what some of the concerns are? Because, when I'm hearing things about like the auto repair or whatever, like one of the top things I hear from people when I'm anywhere near Coney Island Avenue is just how difficult it is to walk down it because things are spilling on the sidewalk. So, it seems to me like doing things to try to fix that would be good, right? So I just wanted to know if there's any kind of like unintended consequences or so forth that are brought up, or if it's just opinions on favorable or not, because I think it's a little hard for me to like kind of reason through it if someone's just like, well, I don't like, nightlife, for example, as opposed to like, this will create this kind of quality of life impact. And, there is a lack of follow-up or something like that in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't, it's so many different boards from so many different parts of the city that I'm afraid that if I try to lump it in, I will do so according to my own biases. So I don't know how objectively I can answer that without it in front of me. You can go to the ZAP portal and open them up and see, but I will say this much, that they are all quality of life and sort of concerns about whether the aspirations and ambitions of this will be realized versus unintended consequences. It kind of goes to the Glenn Woolen description of balancing, what you can control and what you can't control, and whether you think the pluses outweigh the minuses. And for those who are unfavorable and those who had conditions, those conditions, I think, were really to hedge against the unintended consequences or the abuse of the, lack of oversight that the as of right proposals would provide. Does that
Sean,
help at all? Sorry.
yeah, I think so. And I just wanted to piggyback on your comments as well. And Liz, just using your example of, I think holistically, I think I get DCP's vision and wanting to improve, but I think they rely on a lot of other city agencies, whether it's the Department of Buildings or DEP, to regulate and like mitigate noise complaints. And this is where things are bottlenecked and or agencies aren't communicating with one another and they're just siloed. And then um, I think a great example of this is just having worked previously at DCWP and the number of complaints that I received as it relates to just street vending. And just it becomes a whack-a-mole situation. And I don't think, like, I agree. Coney Island with the auto body shops, it's terrible, but I don't think spreading them out, like based on what I'm seeing, and like just because of the adjacent siting, like helps the situation. I think that this just really needs like another way, like looking at the problem from a different angle rather than saying like, oh, we'll just spread this out just to ease the pain there. So that's where I'm coming from, and I think overall I do like where their vision's at. I just think that their approach and relying on other agencies for enforcement is just a little short-sighted there, especially when we are having just vacancies across the board throughout many different city agencies where enforcement is severely lacking. And I'll leave it there, and I'll pass it over to Glenn.
Thank you. Now, my comment is that from everything I've heard in all these different meetings, the city of Yes is about economic opportunity. That means that they're trying to make it easier for businesses to grow, do well, et cetera, et cetera. And there is certainly a positive aspect to that. The problem is that in almost no case do they include any mechanism to allow for the public, the people who live around these various businesses, to have any input. And when they make them as of right, you have no input. It doesn't come to the community board. The businesses simply do what they want to do. And when asked about it, their fallback position is that there are certain agencies that are supposed to um, police these things, let's say. But we know that that very rarely occurs. So there should be some mechanisms for example, similar to what we get in land use things, where you're going to do something that's different, that you have to notify people within 400 feet or some such, and that they have a chance to come to a community board and have a say. So we get a sense, should we support this or should we not? None of that is built in anywhere that I could see, which we did recommend a couple of times, but it isn't there. So your specific example just falls into that category. There is no mechanism to try to help anybody walk down Coney Island Avenue. It's simply about improving business opportunities for existing and new businesses. All right, I'm done. Thank you.
Sean?
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I've said this a few times and I hesitated, but I am going to say it again. I mean, you all, or most of you, there are a few names I don't know here, but I'll say it out loud anyway. I mean, you all know me. You know, I ride around on a pretty high horse and don't really talk about my failures all that often, but I have never had success getting a zoning violation enacted by the Department of Buildings so that we solved the problem at hand. And these have ranged in my 12 years from illegal curb cuts on, to parking pads, to a cheese factory in a house, a dog kennel in a house, a wig shop in a house, a soap and candle manufacturing going on in a house. And things don't sound that in your face. Although the smell of vanilla apparently is cloying after the first couple days. So just the fact that there's just a zero, and we've worked really hard and followed up and tried to elevate it to the elected officials, and by it I mean various things over the years. Not one DOB zoning violation in 12 years was successfully employed to get the business. Other things happened and there were changes, but not DOB zoning violations. So that's my worry, is that if there isn't a mechanism in place now, I don't see that there's anything woven into this that will ensure improvement in order to guide this in the way it's intended. And I've also said many times that I think the worst enemy of a good idea is a bad plan. So that's my overarching concern with a lot of these things.
Thanks for sharing that, Sean. Do you know, like, so for example, with the audit body example, I'm seeing that within that proposal, there would be a requirement for a BSA special permit. Would that come through the community board?
Yeah, the BSA, yeah, that would come, the BSA hearings we would make a recommendation to BSA the same way we do with special permits. But even on those, you might remember that we've got the auto body shop on Bedford and Cortelyou that had a variance, and it was grandfathered in, and then it had a variance, and that variance was provided by our board conditionally, and that business has not met any of those conditions. They didn't do it on the first day, and they've never done it since, and they're still in business. So that's another example of not being able to, stop something once it's moving forward.
Thank you for that, Sean. Carl, go ahead.
Folks, and so I joined Corazon and Chairwoman Brown at the public hearing at Brooklyn Borough Hall on this, and it was quite the experience. I felt like, and this is just me speaking as a person, right? It definitely felt disrespectful from a process standpoint in terms of how the meeting was structured, and then it also felt disrespectful to the people who were there in terms of the process and how the city has gone about the work for the zoning text amendments. And so the meeting was supposed to start at 6. Quorum wasn't achieved until 6:40 p.m. And at some point in the meeting, enough people had left where quorum was lost, right? And the Brooklyn Borough president himself wasn't there. His counsel was leading the meeting per some order. And there were some people whose designees were there, but they themselves weren't there, right? And so there were definitely people who wanted to testify publicly, and they were there. And there was a consistent thread from these people who had testified publicly, and the thread was that they didn't feel like they had been included in the process, right? Like they felt that the communication was, oh, we're going to do this and you're going to be fine. And the consistent thread was, but you never came to us and it doesn't seem like you will. And so that's, so like Glenn mentioned, the question about, hey, as of right, and then, Sean mentioning the challenges that she's facing in terms of getting responses from city officials and also city employees to work on things. There definitely was a concern that came up in that public hearing, and for me personally, it was palpable, where it's just there's a lot that wasn't done from a communication standpoint for people to feel like they were included, where they're not even getting to the part where this could be a good idea, right? Just because they're looking at the way things are working, and it's basically, oh, like we're an afterthought, So that's a huge pain point. It's like the communication that exists today or the lack thereof, and then given that situation, people's concerns about what that communication process or lack thereof could look like in the future, if this were to go through as is. So that's definitely a huge pain point and a concern, for many individuals, right? So that's it from me.
Thanks, Carl. Florencia?
Good night, everyone. In regards to what Carl just said, that just seems to be like what most agencies do, not consult the communities or the people who are concerned. I've heard other community board district managers at other meetings have similar complaint about just knowing that things are being implemented or things are being done, and they were never notified. The residents weren't notified. and it's just a matter of formality sometimes where it's either listed in, in some kind of a notification board, whether it's the newspaper or mentioned on the news or something, and then just going ahead with it. And then the other concern is, as Sean stated, and I agree with what Sean said, is having these plans and wanting them to be implemented without even what Ed said, checking with the other agencies, verifying and having like a solid plan as to whether this will work or not, but just having a plan and wanting to implement it just to see it happen doesn't necessarily mean it's a good plan at all. And grandfathering in other uh, businesses, that can happen as well. That we're looking for solutions to be had. And I personally, I don't feel like they're really concerned about the solutions, but just implementing the plans that they have. So that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Florencia, for sharing that. Go ahead, Sean.
I guess just by way of, trying to frame it for thought about next week, because, it's the Community Environment Committee, and you've got only going to be looking at 8 through the rest of them, but you've got life sciences and maybe microdistribution even falls into that, and cultural affairs, maybe nightlife and amusements has some foothold through a cultural affairs lens, and then economic development is also part of the title of the committee. So, and this is what this is all about. So if you want to take a look at the ZAP portal, or just take a look at those 8 through 18 proposals, through the lens of your committee, I just thought it was an opportunity to, kind of add some focus to this very wily kind of complex proposal.
Thank you, Sean. Glenn?
Yes, just to piggyback on what Sean's saying, you see, this is a mayoral initiative, and when the mayor initiates these type of proposals, they get rammed through. Stopping it isn't going to happen, but possibly tweaking it around the edges might be able to happen. So I do think that's a really good idea to look at this things that are specific to your committee to be brought up on the committee of the whole, and see if we can't add some language that might, with a little luck, move things in a more positive direction. That's it. Thank you.
So, and then to that, I will say I'm glad they didn't tack on casinos to this proposal.
I mean, that's going on.
And that's in parallel, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're doing it in parallel. So they just had the meeting in like whatever community board is like on the east side by the UN. They just had that meeting, so they're happening in parallel, right? I mean,
Who said whack-a-mole? Was that you, Ed? Did you say whack-a-mole earlier? Yeah, amen.
I did.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, Proposal 18 does say create new kinds of zoning districts for future job hubs. So interpret at will. Did anyone else have anything I guess, they would like to share, particular thoughts that they would like to bring up for next week's meeting?
Or any recommendations overall? Yeah.
not next week, but more of the future. It's just like, this is crazy, and we haven't even hit the craziest one yet, which is affordable housing, right? Like, that's the third one. And so just thinking of communication again, even if it's a 60 or a 90-day window, if that does get released in the spring, that takes us to the summer when the community boards are out, and we do that same dance before where the community boards, rightly so, voice their displeasure that, hey, you're doing this massive thing when we're finished for the summer. And 59 community boards, everyone has their own set of bylaws. So you can't guarantee that every single one of them have a mechanism to have a committee of the whole. And that's also not fair, right? So, but for all the hard work and all the toughness and communication stuff, the most difficult one is coming up, right? Like that's that one. And me personally, I think I think they did the order wrong, but that's just me personally, right? Like, so I think they should have done the order differently. So, but that's just me.
Thank you for that, Carl. I also just realized that this next week's meeting will be happening the same day in the evening later, but as the mayor's state of the city address. So it will be interesting considering these things after whatever he has to say that day.
Yeah, good point. And if you do have a chance, I know this text amendment itself was a lot to read. But if you do have a chance to jump on and see, a lot of boards were really thoughtful in how they expressed their concerns, and others maybe a little bit less so. But it's interesting to see where the concerns are coalescing around certain elements of this, where there's more expressed on, like again, I said 5 and 11. Take a look if you can. Let me know if you have trouble accessing it.
So I think we can go ahead and move on to other business. If there is any, I will take the opportunity to share with this community and the board that I'm expecting the birth of my son in about 10 days, roughly. We do have a
Snap!
date, so
Okay, my dude.
so I will be around in a limited capacity, but Melissa is always accessible as well, and yeah, I look forward to seeing and sharing wonderful news in the coming days.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yes, we wish you and your son healthy entrance into the world.
Thank you, Glenn.
Keep us posted, Ed.
Let's not
Congrats.
forget the person having the baby, I guess.
The whole family.
The whole family.
Have fun welcoming the addition.
Thank you. And I guess we can go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 8:04 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for your time, and have a good night. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
Congratulations.